Hi everybody, welcome back. Well, it's that time of year again, starting with even before Black Friday, continuing on through Cyber Monday, when we are bombarded with messages telling us to buy stuff. So photographers, we're getting bombarded with messages and YouTube videos about all the neatest new stuff, neatest new cameras, and that we absolutely have to run out and buy them. I think that we have gotten to the point in photography where any camera that has been made, even up to 10 years ago, is at the point of being sufficient for almost anything. Yeah, the newer ones have some nice features, and switching to mirrorless has been something that I think was a good idea for me. I think before you run out and buy new equipment, you got to really think about, is that a want? Or is that really, is it really a want, or is it a need? So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the Lumix G9. Yeah, there are newer Lumix cameras now. There's the GH5 Mark II has come out, and then the GH6, which is quite an advancement. Neither of those two cameras, nor the OM Systems newer cameras, are something that I feel I absolutely have to have. This G9 has been a real workhorse. I mean, consider that Panasonic released this camera in 2017, I think towards the end of the year. But they put in a really fast processor, and that has enabled them to do firmware updates that have increased especially with the autofocus, the continuous autofocus in video is vastly better than it was when the camera was released. Essentially, the processor speed allowed them to speed up the sampling rate at which the autofocus system could sample. So it really improved things on the autofocus front. I know there's people going like, well, it's still not that good. Here's a clip of, this is a North American goldfinch in our yard feeding on giant purple hyssop seeds at the end of the summer. And as you can see, it's really windy. It's just a really, really windy day. And this was shot with this G9 on video autofocus, continuous. And the animal detection that it has locked onto that bird and held on to it. Does it still have occasional issues? Yeah, once in a while. But for the most part, I've found it's actually better than, I think, any Canon, except maybe any Canon that I used back when I used Canon, except maybe the 80D that had dual pixel autofocus. And the 70D did too, but the 80D was better. But this is still pretty close. So this has really been my main camera since July of 2019. And actually, it's kind of a little interesting story as to how I ended up with this. Because when I left, actually had gone back to work full time, kind of really with no intention of coming back to professional photography, and things happen in the corporate world. That's a long story, not going to bore people with it. So I ended up out without a job, and decided to start doing some professional photography. And I had a G85, and I had a couple of GX85s. And one evening in July of 2019, and I don't hide my political leanings at all. In fact, today I think you ought to really make sure people know where you stand. So as I've mentioned before, in 2008 was the Chicago event photographer for the Obama campaign. And occasionally there was more than I could do, and I'd have my friend Howard Simmons shoot a concurrent event is what I did. I hadn't really done, other than for local politicians here in Oak Park, I hadn't really done any national campaign work. So anyway, this evening in July of 2019, I get a text. It says, "Hi, Todd, this is Joe from a campaign, a presidential campaign. How are you doing this evening?" And it's July of 2019. And if you think back to that, the primary field was pretty big. There were a lot of people running. And so my response was, I'm doing fine. And I should say, I thought this was a fundraising text. I thought they were asking for money. So my response was, I'm doing well, thank you. I like your candidate, but it's early yet, and I haven't made up my mind, and I'm kind of not in the position to do any kind of a contribution. And the response was, oh, I just wanted to see if you're available for doing a photo shoot tomorrow night. And my text back to the guy was, oops. And I got the reply was LOL. And so, as it turned out, this campaign has a photographer who could not, there were several events going on, and he was not going to be able to make the event that they needed done. Actually, now that I think about it, it was actually it wasn't the next night, it was the night after that. However, I really kind of had this thing about showing up to shoot professional photography for a national campaign with a prosumer, prosumer body like the G85. So I thought, well, if this keeps happening, I'm going to need a professional camera anyway. But I didn't really think there was enough time to order a camera online, because if anything happened and it didn't arrive, because that does happen, I wouldn't have it. So first thing in the morning, the day before this event, I start calling around every bricks and mortar camera store, the ones that we have left here in Chicago. None of them carry Panasonic. And I think, actually one does, Dodd does, but they didn't have a G9. So finally I call Central Camera, downtown. Big old camera store, has been there forever, got burned during the riots. They've been down there a while. They're supposedly are rebuilding, maybe it's rebuilt. I said, hey, I'm just looking for a Panasonic G9, and hopefully with a professional lens. And the guy says, oh, I don't have any, except I have a used one. It says, I'm looking at it now, it says it's like new in box. And I said, I will be right there. So I hopped in the car, drove to downtown Chicago. It was outside of rush hour, so I actually got there in about half an hour. And walked in, and he pulled it out, and I looked at it. I took some shots with it. They had both the Leica 12 to 60, and they had a 12 to 30 f2.8. I ended up with the Leica, which later on I replaced with a 12 to 35 f2.8. Went home, charged the batteries, started reading, making sure I knew how to use it, and essentially what I realized was that whoever bought this camera either bought it as a gift for somebody, or they bought it for themselves, but then they soon realized, because probably looking for a simpler camera, they soon realized, maybe a smaller, lighter one, because really, honestly, this is about the same size and weight as a Canon APS-C 80D or 90D, I'm guessing. I think what happened was, or they bought it, they bought it for their spouse, and the spouse looked at it and was like, yeah, I'm never going to use this. So it was practically a brand new camera that I got for several $100s off the price of new, and the thing has been perfect. And I have to say that I used to think, when I shot Canon, I used to think that their bodies were probably the best ergonomically, but I think really Panasonic just did an amazing job with the ergonomics on this camera, because it is the best I've ever used. You have everything. It's like they looked at Canon and they looked at Nikon and they took the best of both. One of the things that always bugged me about Canons is they'd have the on-off switch over here, except on their Rebels. For some reason, they had the on-off switch around the mode dial over on the right side, so you could flick it with your thumb. It always seemed to me that it makes way more sense to have the on-off dial, on-off switch over here. Well, it's right here. This is the only Lumix that has a top LCD panel, which is nice. It lights up. I don't know if you can see that. There, it lights up. It's nice because you don't have to look through the viewfinder or at the screen to see what your settings are. Although these days, I have to look at it with my glasses. And it's so customizable. You've got all of these custom function buttons that you can actually assign other than the default settings. And actually I have these two front buttons by the lens mount. This top one is to switch between regular dual IS and the IS lock feature in video. And the bottom one is to switch to constant preview or not when I'm shooting manually. A little switch over here, which the default on it, and I've never changed that, is to go from mechanical shutter to silent electronic shutter. And so if I'm in a situation where I think the shutter noise might be distracting, I can just flick that over and it goes to electronic shutter without any kind of cheesy shutter sound effect. So it's completely silent. So it's a wonderful camera. There's not much you could do to improve upon this. A newer sensor, if Panasonic decides to update this thing, obviously that would be good. I personally think it would be great if they could just make it a little bit smaller, maybe close to the size of the G95, but keep all of the professional features. The one advantage that the G95 has, which is what I'm filming on, is that it has unlimited video time even in 4K. So you can shoot until the battery runs out, whereas on the G9 you have the 30-minute limitation on video files. So rare that I've ever had to shoot more than 30 minutes with this. And when a couple times that I used the G95, I had to do a 2-hour bar mitzvah service on video. I had to use the G95, or might have been a G85 at the time, but G85 had the same limitless video recording. So I don't feel like I need to get any kind of a new camera anytime soon as my main body. What I thought I'd do now is just leave you guys with a slideshow of a bunch of images going back to when I first got the G9, going from street scenes around my suburb here, a little bit of Chicago, I think, and some nature/landscape shots. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, please hit the like button. You could always subscribe, that'd be great. If you hit the little bell to be notified of my upcoming videos, you'll never miss one. But again, here is a little slideshow. Hope you like it. I'm Todd Banner. I will see you next time.